Well, welcome to Afternoon Light Live, and today we are celebrating 80 years of Book Week. So since 1945, when a group of Australian writers, librarians and educators were inspired by a dinner with the US Children's Book Council to seize upon this idea of Children's Book Week, the event has grown from modest but pretty fast-growing beginnings into the longest-running national literacy initiative in the country. The very first Book Week in November 1945 featured ABC radio sessions, library exhibitions, school activities, and even a poster competition. By 1946, the inaugural Children's Book of the Year Awards had been launched, and a small Newcastle primary school hosted the first ever Book Week parade, a tradition that has become iconic, albeit a little bit of a nightmare for parents like me. From those origins, Book Week has evolved into a beloved annual celebration in schools and libraries across Australia. Every August, it sparks the imagination of children through dress-ups and book parades, author visits and themed activities. Costumes are as eagerly anticipated as Christmas and Easter traditions, and the CBCA's prestigious awards raise the profile of Australians' children's literature, ensuring our young readers discover new and amazing and inspirational stories. This year, for the 80th anniversary in 2025, under the theme Book and Adventure, the Children's Book Council of Australia will celebrate the 80-year journey with a special birthday book adventure events on this Saturday, the 23rd of August, in every single state. But today, on Afternoon Light, we will be celebrating by talking to two wonderful children's authors. We have Jackie French, one of Australia's most beloved and prolific children's authors, and we have two of her lovely books here. And Diary of a Wombat, I'm sure, will be very, very familiar to you all. And we have The Beach They Call Gallipoli. So welcome, Jackie. And we also have Kate O'Donnell. We also have Kate O'Donnell with live in person with me today. And Kate is a Melbourne-based young adult author, and she is a third-generation CBCA committee member. So today we'll be exploring what Book Week has meant across the decades, of course, its history and how it continues to shape our national story. And as usual with Afternoon Light Live, I will talk to Kate and Jackie for 30 minutes. I'll try to be disciplined, but I know we've got a lot to chat about. And then we'll go to you, our live audience, for Q&A. If you've done this before, you'll know there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you haven't, well, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So pop your questions in there. I will receive them by some miracle here, and I will read them out as quickly as I can so we can cover as many as possible. So thank you very much. Well, Kate, I'm going to start with you because you have diligently brought 2 volumes of Book Week history with you, so you're well prepped. Tell me where Book Week came from 80 years ago.
So 80 years ago, well, in September 1945, the librarian from the US Information Library in Sydney, so she's an American woman, Mary Townsend Knowles, got together with a group of like-minded children's book enthusiasts, including Charles Bull, who was from the ABC. And she told them all about this initiative they'd been doing in the States for Children's Book Week. It had been running in the States since 1919 as a way to inspire children to read. And after one evening sharing ideas and becoming enthusiastic, Book Week was born, and they held it 2 months later in November 1945.
That's incredible. I mean, 2 months to organise Book Week, and not just Book Week, but it was sessions on the ABC radio, it was events in libraries.
An exhibition, a poster competition. They had a theme, United Through Books, which was an international theme.
And of course, we're at the end, we've just finished World War II, so that idea of United Through Books is sort of linked to the concept that we should all find peace and get to know each other throughout the world, and I guess with its basis in the United Nations too.
Exactly, and I think that hunger to know the world was a really wonderful sort of boost for children's books, and the fact that we were ready to sort of start a modern era in Australia and celebrate being Australian and Australian books. It's just perfect timing, really.
Yeah. And then this sort of idea that had started in the United States. I mean, when I was preparing for this, I found it quite curious that it was started by the Boy Scouts librarian, Franklin Matthews, who was horrified, apparently, by the types of books he found young boys to be reading. And he wanted to lobby publishers to produce works which were more age appropriate. So was there a sentiment around this in Australia's Book Week when it was developed?
I don't think there was a conversation about books being appropriate. I think it was about respect for the child reader and making sure that there were books that would appeal to them and that they saw themselves in. The US Children's Book Council was a sort of an association of publishers, so I think that was established in 1945 as well. And I imagine in total response to that initial Boy Scouts demand. And so these publishers had banded together, and the Australian Children's Book Council doesn't work exactly the same way. We are an association of children's book lovers, whether it's through teachers, authors, booksellers, and we have a good relationship with publishers, but and have had since 1945, but it's slightly different in that way.
What was the publishing world like in the 40s, though? Because it's quite different from now, obviously.
Really different. Obviously, most of the books Australian children were reading came from the UK, the very English stories. We had been publishing books by Australians, of course, but they were all published in the UK.
So you'd write the book here,
and then a UK publisher would pick it up potentially. Right.
Yeah. Because one of our earliest books was Seven Little Australians, very much pre-Book Week, first published in 1893, and apparently still to this day, 130 years on, being published. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Jackie, do you have obviously not 80 years ago, but early memories of Book Week in your very early childhood?
I'm actually about to do something really snarky that I do in a lot of my books, and say the history that most people think is actually wrong. It didn't start in 1945. It started in the first Children's Book Week in Australia was 1944, and it was started by primarily England and Russia. And then America joined in, and then Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. And the thing was that children unite the world with books. And there were book parades, etc., etc. World War II was still going. It was celebrated in November, I think the first week of November, 1944. But the idea behind it was the United Nations. And I think probably the people organizing it were also the people working on starting United Nations when the war ended. And they thought this was a good way to begin the United Nations. Books unite children across the world. And the artwork were basically children of every nationality, some in their national dress, all together holding books. And all standing together, arms around each other, etc., holding books. Then the next one, was a far more American influenced, but it had pretty much the same slogan and pretty much the same timing. But no, it was initiated in 1944.
Oh, Jackie, you're going to have to talk to these people who've written these books.
Well, I mean, that's a fascinating story, and I guess it reflects that hope that children give us, that they are innocent, and they don't see, race, creed, or colour. They don't come with inbuilt prejudices. So the hope for world peace comes through the innocence of children and getting to know each other through literature
I'm not even sure about that. I think we may have an instinctive fear of the unknown, whether it's future or whether it's other people. And that's how books unite us. If you give kids books about other cultures, other races, other times, other possibilities, they actually live it. When you give a kid a book, you're just giving them some black lines on white paper. Their imagination is doing everything else. So they become those characters. So I think it literally does unite them. They may never have met anyone from Canada or I'm trying to think of some other country, Ukraine.
That's what
But
you saw, Jackie, when I looked back through the Book Week
there'll be
celebrations
it.
over the years.
Mm.
It's books from different cultures that were
Yeah.
part of the exhibitions, and it was that hunger for information and for solidarity of children to
Yes.
see themselves reflected across the world. And
Exactly.
I love this idea that we're not actually sure where Book Week started. We've got this new news, but it shows how hungry that we were as a country to celebrate this and to raise the profile. And it's so special, and I think that goes straight to the heart of what the Children's Book Council does.
So
the question that you actually asked me, the memory. My paternal grandmother, I think, was one of the first members. And I know that the first prizes given were camellias. And she was a camellia grower. I don't know. I would love to think it was her camellias that were given. I really wish Jenny could have known that I would one day win some of the awards. She died before my first book was published. But I'm probably the first generation of Australian writers who grew up on books recommended by the Children's Book Council. Every year I would get the winner sent from Jenny, as well as a lot of other books that she thought I should read. But they were Australian. Every book she sent me was Australian. And back then in the 1950s, that was an incredible education for a would-be writer. It never occurred to me that we could not have Australian literature, which could be loved across the world.
And I mean, that goes to my next question, Kate, about how Book Week evolved with the evolution the following year of the first awards, the Children's Book Awards.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me about how this came about and the impact that's had over the years.
Yeah, so the first Children's Book of the Year, Children's Council Book of the Year award was awarded in 1946. So we're really excited to be celebrating 80 years of that next year. And it began as a single award for a book. The inaugural winner was Carrawingie the Emu. And we, as the CBCA, have been celebrating Carrawingie as a character over the past year, and will continue to. But it has grown over the years, making sure that there's a category for all different age groups and representing children from 0 to 18. And the awards are so important to the industry. I think that they not only become like a celebration of quality Australian children's literature for Australian children. They're a reference for teachers, for parents, for carers, to know quickly at a glance what books they can be giving their children. They're also supporting authors, where the Children's Book Council Book of the Year Awards you have a financial prize. It's no longer, Jackie, just the camellia or a handshake if you're a man. There's a financial prize. And for publishers, it means they'll reprint the books, which, like in Australia, it's not guaranteed that you're going to have a reprint or even sell out the first print run of your book. And so the awards really support the industry in that way. But also the sticker. Like you, Jackie, I grew up getting the books, and whether it's the notables sticker, the shortlist, the honour book, or the winner, you knew that sticker meant that it was going to be a great book for you.
Yeah.
Look, it was that I'm a writer, I think, because of the CBC. I'm a professional writer. My first book was shortlisted for that and for the New South Wales Premier's Award. And the Angus St Robinson very rashly said afterwards, when suddenly this little unknown book was reprinted and reprinted and reprinted because of the CBC award, rashly said, "Oh, we'd love to publish anything you write." It was many decades ago, and I think they had no idea quite how many books it would be. But it was because of that award. They'd liked it enough to publish it, but they would never have given me that latitude and immediately made me, okay, this is my profession. I will now do nothing else except write books. If it hadn't been for the CBC, it made me.
Yeah, I mean, that just shows the power of those awards, the inspiration it gives you. I mean, obviously there's the ability to make a living out of that profession, but I mean, being inspired in those early days by something like the Children's Book Award.
And Jackie, do do you think that, sorry to take over the question asking, but do you think that it also legitimised children's literature in the eyes of those publishers? Sort of that it's an incredible, that it gives a reminder that the books are literature.
I think it did even more than that. That various stages in publishing, publishing for children was the most brought in the most money. Because one of the things about if you write a children's book, there's always another generation of children. If you write a book for adults, the adults will read it. And then that's it. You have to wait for a new generation of adults. If you write a book for 10 to 12-year-olds, there are always going to be. They are then going to move up with your books as they get older. So publishers realised not just that they were valuable, I think they probably always had, but they realised that they were a very good economic basis for their publishing houses. And so they became important. Rather than just throw away good enough for kids, they really started working on the concept of a picture book. And radical picture books instead of the ones that we'd grown up with, the little golden books or the short stories with 1 or 2 illustrations. Australia became an innovator. Look, I remember in the 1980s and 90s, we were producing the most unusual kind of book. I mean, Sean Tan, for example. I don't think you could have had a Sean Tan anywhere else in Australia. Australia produced new genres, impossible genres that other places would take up. That's no longer the case. I think the rest of the world has caught up and their publishing is highly adventurous too. But I think the adventures started in Australia and with Australian publishing.
Well, you heard it here first. Kate, what about the Book Week parades?
Yes.
And I mean, I'm in my final year of Book Week parades. I have a year 6, and we have had, I would say, 4 weeks of planning.
Okay.
For the 28 girls in the year to all wear a coordinated fairy costume, and we were talking the Rainbow Fairy series. Yeah. So anyway, we've sourced the items from the $2 shop and all that. And I love the idea that the kids are getting really enthusiastic about it, but it is always a bit of a stress. And I actually always do put a note in my calendar to start Book Week preparations quite early on, because you don't want to be working it out the night before. God forbid.
Oh, well, I think you were saying earlier, the first parade was in the first parade that we've found, 1945.
Jackie may have other information. Yes.
Adamstown Primary in Newcastle. So the parades have been happening forever, and I love that idea. We've got all these old photos on Trove and in our history books of children dressed up in all sorts of characters, and there's such a beautiful purpose behind that, of being able to cosplay, to dress up as your favorite character and embody the stories that you're loving. It makes me sad that it's a stressful time for a lot of parents and children. I think a friend of mine, her sons did not want to participate in the parade this year, so they did miss out. But I do think you've got a lot of schools who are creating their alternative activities aside from the parade.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the parade. I know it happened. My mum, Jane Parsons, was one of the Geelong Children's Book Council organisers, and we had a festival every year. What sticks in my mind is the author visits.
Yes.
Getting to meet my favourite authors. That was always my highlight, and probably same as Jackie, why I became a writer. And so I think the parade is one thing, but there's so much more. And looking at Instagram this week, go and look at what's happening in schools around the country. They're booking an adventure. There's destination signs, preparing to go on an aeroplane, pretend, and it's just spectacular. Sort of that. I love the physical act of Book Week.
Yes.
So, and the parade is part of that,
yes.
but it's not the whole part.
Yeah. What's your favourite costume you've seen this year?
I have seen A Real Pigeon, which is a junior fiction series for by Andrew MacDonald and Ben Wood, Australian authors. And my friend's son had this fantastic hat on, and he looked like a little pigeon. And he was so happy with his costume.
And Jackie, did you get involved in Book Week parades now or in the past?
There were no book year parades when I was a child, but there certainly were as a parent. And I remember one of them. My son and a friend got really carried away. It was one of my earlier series, Children of the Valley, um, uh, a dystopia in the future. And Mopoke and Possum go out and they're foraging for things left in the civilization, and one of them is metal. And he and his friend worked for about 3 weeks, creating their costumes out of old animal skins and bits of old metal. It weighed about 3 tons. They even made a raft, which they tried to float and sank. Anyway, they proudly had this incredible costume carrying this enormous great raft. And they didn't win. And I was devastated. And then suddenly the headmaster stood up and said, "But this year we are giving a special award for the most magnificent costume of all on today." And of course it was them, and they got up to wild applause, still dragging 3 tons of ancient rusted metal and this enormous heavy raft, etc., with them. Them. It was very much the book. I'd love to see it combined with something like a Halloween thing, that the costumes are made by the kids with things that they take to school to take the pressure off parents and the parents who can afford to hire costumes. Have the kids design and make the costumes, and then the teachers take them around the local district that has been leafleted and publicised. And instead of candy, on the front fences, there are left books for the kids. Now, the books, of course, would have to be collected by the teachers in case there were razor blades or they were seriously unsuitable books for kids, which I'm sure some people would put out there. But to actually bring it back to the heart of book again, rather than the playing, rather than the dressing up, reading in Iceland, for example, on Christmas Eve, families get together and they read together. They spend the whole day. They read as a family, one to each other, The United Arab Emirates, their celebration is with adults and books too. There's book week, book day for kids, but it's also a book day for adults. And it would be lovely to just making it for children often makes kids think that books are for kids. We really need to show kids a book culture. There was a study in New York that children become readers if there are 70 books in the house. Doesn't matter what the books are, doesn't matter if they're library books or owned books, but they need to have that role model of actually having books. And I'd love to see Book Week extended to include communities, include adults doing readings, and also the giving of books, new or secondhand, as gifts to each other.
Yeah, I think, very, very nicely put. There, in this story of the history of Book Week, we did struggle a bit to find some direct Robert Menzies connections. Kate did look through the histories here. Maybe you have some, Jackie, because you're uncovering some secrets from the past. But I did love a quote, just thinking about people really loving books and loving reading. I had a quote here from Robert Menzies' mother, Kate. And she described her son's voracious reading habits. "We think that his wide reading had a lot to do with his success. I can never mention a book without him having read it. He used to look at a law book as affectionately as if it was his firstborn child."
I feel that way about all books.
But I think, it shows that, whoever you are, you can be, a lifelong reader and lover of literature. And it really, well, according to Kate Menzies, it was his love of reading that made him the success he was. So we'll leave it to you all to speculate. But I guess I want to move now on, Jackie, to some of your books. Now, you've obviously written lovely books for younger children like Diary of a Wombat, but you have got an amazing array of books. I was on your website yesterday and I actually couldn't believe how many books you'd written. So you are a woman who never rests, but all these historical fiction books, which I think is fascinating. Can you tell me about why you went into historical fiction and the importance you see of using historical fiction as a way of teaching kids about their nation's story or other stories as well, indeed?
I think I was brought up in a family that never really regarded history as the past, that you cannot understand the present without knowing where you've come from. And you can't really know where you are unless you know where you're going, have some idea of where you're going. I got into trouble at school because they kept on saying the early colony was starving, and I'd put up my hand and say, no, miss, that wasn't right, because I've got my great something grandmother's diary as one of the first free settlers, and that actually said what it was like. I spent my first 4 years with great-grandma, who was not a teacher because married women were not allowed to be teachers, but she was married to a headmaster, and of course headmasters' wives had to teach the little kids reading and writing for no money. And she told me stories of herself as a child, her grandmother as a child, her great-grandmother as a child, and they told stories of their great-grandmother. And so I grew up with at least 300 years of the stories of the women in our family. So I never chose to be a history writer. For me, it always just seemed, okay, I'm writing a book. And of course, history is going to come into that, even if the present does too. But mostly in history, what I'm looking for is the history we have got wrong, that we think we know, or as with the Secret Sparrow, where they burnt 360,000 reports of women fighting in the trenches in World War I, so that to keep it secret. Why? That's what I'm attracted to, where either by accident or sometimes by good intention or sometimes simply by bias, the history we think we know is very, very far from the truth. And I think that matters, because if we operate on a mistaken view of the past, if we get our facts wrong, we can get into trouble.
Well, it's my favourite genre, historical fiction. I absolutely love it. I always feel like it's an opportunity to learn something. I read Maggie O'Farrell's Hamlet the other day, and I thought, wow. I mean, I appreciate a lot of it can be the fiction, not just the history, but getting a sense of some of the 17th century life in England, obviously the story of Shakespeare and the people in his life, you think, wow, I feel so enriched and also entertained.
Well, it was Jackie's book, Somewhere Around the Corner, which I think was 1994, that was pivotal for my reading and sort of love of history as well. And in that book, Barbara is a present day girl who is swept back into Depression era Australia, and I still love it, Jackie. I think about it all the time. Thank you for that book.
Now, we've got 1 more minute of our general discussion, Jackie and Kate, and then we do have to throw to the audience Q&A. I have quite a lot of questions already piling up, but if you haven't logged in your question, please do so quickly, because I generally do ask them in order. So it's the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and my colleague Angus will shoot them over to me here so I can read. If you put your name, if you are not anonymous, if you put your name, I'll give you a shout out. You may like that, you may not, but you'll get a shout out if you put your name. So look forward to getting all your questions. I did have, I think, one more question, just a light one before we go to our audience Q&As. What was your favourite book growing up, children's book?
Mine, well, Somewhere Around the Corner was one of my favourite books, Jackie. I also loved a picture storybook called Kenju's Forest by Junko Morimoto. which is about a young boy who plants a forest by his village, and everyone says he's crazy for doing it. And it's just this beautiful passion project of his throughout his life. I had a real attraction to very sort of emotional and dark sort of brooding stories, even as picture books. Mem Fox wrote Wilfred Gordon MacDonald Partridge and The Very Best of Friends, and those grabbed me as well.
Yeah.
What about you, Jackie?
Oh, look, by far, Karalta by Mary Grant Bruce. I just absolutely adored it. It's Australian author, of course, and she wrote other books which I adore. But that one, it was one of the few books to be published in World War II. It was about this English girl who's evacuated to Australia, and she and a young soldier discover a German spy. But it was just so evocative of the time because it was written at the time. It came out, I think, in 1942. And I loved it. It's historical fiction, except of course it wasn't historical when it was written. And there is just something about it. I think because it was a comfort book. It's a book about a child who was incredibly badly treated. Her mother has died. She's with a German aunt who has completely unemotional. And then she comes to Karalta in Australia, a country town, and she learns to love the country. She learns to love the people. It's just joy and peace and comfort coming out of a time which is horrific. And that really spoke to me as a child. And I think we read it once a week. Karalta. I think I probably read it once. It had been my mother's. She'd been given it as a birthday present in 1942. And of course, in the 1950s, when I was a child, there were very few books around. So most of the books I read, Grandma sent me all of her books, and there were things like Girls' Own Annuals from 1903. Girls were getting into biplanes and having all sorts of adventures going back to ancient Egypt. And so I was brought up on historical literature, which actually wasn't written as historical literature. It was written at the time. I was just reading it 20 or 30 or 40 years later.
We better get to our audience Q&A because I can see we're dipping in. And apologies if you do hear some whirring in the background. It's a working university here, and evidently there's some work going on in the background. We have tried to get it quietened down, but anyway, I hope it's not disturbing the audio too much. It's actually not a question, but from Bridget Griffin Foley. Thanks for your yeah, it is a bit of a question. She wanted to know if Kate and Jackie know of this thesis, which discovers the origins of Book Week and the CBCA. It's by Robin Sheehan Bright, to market the development of Australian children's publishing industry. It was a PhD thesis from Griffith University in 2005.
Robin, I haven't read it. I must. I think I'd love to know more about what academic study is being done about the Children's Book Council and Australian children's books. I think that's something that CBCA want to hear from people. But Robin is an incredible figure in Australian children's literature.
Yeah.
Jack, I haven't read it either, but look, I agree. She is accurate and of course incredibly readable and wonderful and a lovely person. But yes, I would love to read it because it will be I would love to read it. I just didn't know about it.
But it sounds like from your experiences, Jackie, that the Children's Book Awards, the ability of publishers to republish books because children are always sort of cycling through, that this is a great market for the publishing industry. I mean, I think just as a parent, you know, a book is such a nice thing to give a child. It's a hopeful thing to give a child. It's something that, you know, is treasured when you look at sort of the plastic or the fluff, and then you look at the books. The book's the one I think we all like to choose. So it's
And the best job I have ever had and will ever have is as a children's bookseller. If I could stand up all day, I would still do that job. But being able to talk to the kids who come in and about their book.
Yeah.
Best job in the
Gorgeous.
world.
Yeah. Now, this is a question from an anonymous audience member, but thank you for your question. Do you think that with social media, reading has taken a hit with Australian children? Jackie, either of you have something?
I don't have the evidence. I do feel, though, that literacy is declining very, very rapidly in Australia, and we've certainly got the evidence for that. At least with social media, they are learning to read. And increasingly, I'm getting letters from teachers asking for audiobooks, saying that over half their class are unable to read well enough to read the assigned text. And please, could they have an audiobook? And of course, I'm an author. I'm not a publisher. There's nothing I can do about it. At least with social media at the moment, they are reading, and it may be helping literacy. Unfortunately, I think within a few years with AI, people are just going to be talking to their computers rather than reading. But I don't think we should separate the ability to read from enjoying the books. Kids have to have both. They need to have very well qualified and inspired literary teachers. I often ask schools, look, how much do you spend on sport? How much do you spend on books and literacy? How much does that oval cost and that grandstand and the swimming pool? You can borrow an oval, but it's harder to borrow a library for kids. And often the principals are rather stunned. It just didn't occur to them that, of course, they've got a qualified sports teacher who's studied for years to do it, but they don't have a teacher librarian. They just haven't realised the inequality of how much we automatically spend on sport. Look, don't get me wrong, I'm really in favour of sport for kids, but how can we afford to spend all of this on the sporting side and so little on the literacy and the books?
Yes, totally agree with that, Jackie. We've got lots of questions coming in, but if you haven't asked your question, please, this is your opportunity. We have 23 minutes left of questions. So this is an interesting question from Gary Steele. Thanks, Gary. Do you ever feel a political influence in children's literature and children's education? Do you feel like we should minimise it? This is it's an interesting question around, politics and schools and the books that are introduced in the classroom, and because of our democracy, we're all going to disagree on a lot of things, and we hopefully can disagree politely and reasonably, and when the side you vote for doesn't get in, we accept the result and move on. But politics and children's literature and education is it is controversial. Jackie, do you have a view?
No. Look,
No?
it's an interesting subject. I have to say, it's just something I've never paid any attention to. There may very well be something in, I think you'd probably be better asking publishers rather than author. My focus is very much the book I want to write, and I don't think that's influenced by politics. Well, as I said, it's more likely something the politician has tried to hide 60 years ago, and I've managed to dig up in an archive somewhere.
Is that not a political? It could be argued to be a political act too. That you're uncovering a history that you feel was that you think was hidden and needs to be told, and it tells it maybe upturns an understanding of, say, how we fought in World War II. I mean, that is.
I suddenly realise I've actually done that with my most recent book. Published because it's the 80th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I discovered the Japanese official war papers. And I discovered that the history of the dropping of those bombs has been hidden for 80 years. And so for both sides of politics have been arguing without actually knowing the facts of the context in which those bombs were dropped. So I never thought of this as a political act. I thought of this as revealing it. But thinking it over, yes, there probably are political implications. But being an author, I just thought about the story and the history.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting because the context from which you come. Yeah, yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
all art is political. I don't think that that you can separate art from politics, but I think what you're asking about is something different. And there are so many books. There is a book for every child. There's a book for every belief. There's a book for everybody, and you can choose what you read. There's no reason to worry, I suppose, about politics in books. I myself, my most recent book is overtly political. It is about a teenager exploring her voice in politics and how to get out on the street if that's what you want, or if that's not what you want, how else can you make sure that your voice is being counted? Because our children don't have a vote, so they need to know how to explore the world, and books are the most beautiful way to do it.
Now you said that, I suddenly remember that somewhere around the corner starts with a girl in a
demonstration. Yep.
Daughter is in fact really asking about the political state of Australia. But again, I think in that, as you say, all art is political. And of course, I put my own social beliefs into it. So no, I'm not overtly influenced by what the government or the opposition is saying. But of course, I must put my own values into every book. And that will have political implications.
This question, I guess, goes to somewhat the publishing industry, but the tension between publishing and writing. Is there a tension between commercialization of children's books and the genuine art of children's writing? And I guess is that question getting to this, are you, do some publishers suggest to authors they should write in this direction or this topic because that'll sell more, rather than allowing an author to go with their passion or interests or skill set?
I mean, I can let Jackie talk about this as well, but as a former children's book editor and publisher, I think in Australia at least, we want the books to be as good as they are. We want to nurture those authors. There is, of course, a trend worldwide, to look if someone has a great social media following and they want to write a book, that's going to be easier to sell potentially, but not always. So no, I think that publishers want to publish the best books they can.
Right.
Yeah. But Jackie, what's your
experience?
That's
reassuring.
Yeah.
So that's very much the case in Australia, but not America. Diary of a Wombat in America it's published in 40-something countries. America was the only one that censored it. In Diary of a Wombat, the wombat bashes up things. And in America, they decided the wombat couldn't do that because it's a cute little animal and you can't have cute little animals. And also the wombat says, I can't believe humans are so stupid. And of course, we can't have that because that's insulting people, having an animal saying that humans are stupid. So that was censored. And so in America, and I was then told by the chief publisher of that publishing company, they really wanted my next book to be about a cute, sweet little animal, not a stroppy animal. And as I said, the American edition of Diary of a Wombat, they've taken out the stroppiness and they've just left. And there's not much left actually in Diary of a Wombat when you take out the stroppiness.
And the poor American tourist who comes to Australia thinking that a wombat is just a kind of benign, fluffy little kind of fat, waddly thing, and then goes to touch it and gets its fingers bitten off. Well, they would have been warned if they'd read the proper Diary of a Wombat. I mean, it goes, I think, to the controversy a few years ago about the censorship, or at least changing, of Roald Dahl's books. I mean, a lot of them are, they're of their era. I absolutely adored them as a child, but he's very insulting, very naughty, and then of course in his personal life he had some pretty odious opinions. But do you censor the author's original work just because it doesn't meet your modern day sensibilities? Or maybe you just say, well, we're just not going to read that, but if you want to read it, okay, be warned.
Yeah.
remember rereading Peter Pan as a parent, and that line, and we will die as Englishmen. And every year, and I suddenly thought, look, I don't remember that when I read it as a child.
No,
But
would have been remarkable then.
and also too, I don't think it mattered because I had no longing at all to die as an Englishman, nor did any of my son or my friends. And so it just simply didn't impinge. It was accepted as an anachronism and part of the book as when it was written.
And there's new books. There's new books to read.
There's new books. But Peter Pan is iconic.
And Anne of Green Gables is one of my favourite books as well.
Oh.
I read that now and think, oh no, that's not how I see the world, but that's okay. And I'll read a new book.
But it's interesting, even in your lifetime, Kate, and your lifetime, Jackie, what seemed normal, 30 years ago, 60 years ago is completely, different now, and you're the same person, but our experiences sort of shape us and change our attitude. Look, we've got a lot of questions to get through, and I'm mindful we've only got 14 minutes. If you have got a question, please do put it in the Q&A box, but I will keep going with this lovely list. What are some of the defining Australian children's book characters over the years? Are there any that children of today don't know about but would be richer for reading them? That's a good question. Ooh.
Book characters.
Yes. Wow.
Oh.
Look, I think as you read, there are always so many more books. I think if we started, we'd be here for about 3 hours going all of them. Every book which was shortlisted in the picture book section this year deserves to be remembered forever. Look, I would hate to pick out even 20 because I've been leaving out at least 600, I should mention.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
It's so hard. I do think about Rose from Rose Meets Mr. Wintergarten by Bob Graham. I think she was pretty iconic for me. Penny Pollard, Robin Klein, and Anne James. That was in the 80s. Oh, but I'm the same, Jackie. As soon as we start talking,
you'll exclude someone.
Robin Klein is one of our golden authors. I just think she's magic.
Yeah, yeah.
Heroes forms of being a frog, of a girl who only wanted to be a frog and her best friend only wanted to talk in mathematical symbols. Neither of them had a name, but it was brilliant and wonderful and glorious, and I wish every kid in Australia could have a copy of it. So yes, there are books. I feel yes.
I grew up in the Adelaide Hills, and Mem Fox's books, Possum Magic, those characters are kind of iconic for me. Who are the children's authors in Australia that are lesser known who our children would benefit from reading? Again, this will probably be a 3-hour answer, and you'll have excluded someone and offended someone. Is there someone, Jackie, that you think, they really should be more widely read? There are
To be honest, I don't know. I don't read bestseller lists. I don't know the books in schools. So I simply don't know. I see books I love, but I've no idea what their sales figures are. As I said, I'm an author. I'm not in publishing.
Yeah.
There are a lot of books to choose from. So I think that books can get lost in the noise.
Yes.
And as an author, I would be worried about just choosing my friends.
I think that's sensible. Stick to your friends. Do kids surprise you in how they interpret your work in ways you didn't expect? Jackie,
Hitler's Daughter changed the way I looked at the world. Hitler's Daughter is really a book of questions. How do you know what is good and evil when the world around you is insane, etc., etc.? And then I got a letter from a boy, 14-year-old, a school for intellectually handicapped kids, a note from his teacher. It was the first book he'd read, the first letter it read and written, and it just said, "Dear Jackie French, what I have learned from your book is to be very wary of anyone who makes you angry." And I suddenly realized he had answered the question I was trying to find an answer to in Hitler's Daughter. Hatred is contagious Be very wary of anyone who tries to make you angry because you stop thinking. And that was how Hitler did it. He was capable of creating contagious anger with his voice and with his speeches. But luckily, kindness and compassion are contagious too. One act of kindness and compassion, or for that matter, giving books to kids, is contagious. But no, that one letter from a boy made me think about the whole dynamics of politics, war, hatred, and how you can possibly influence it in a completely different way. Once someone starts getting angry, stop listening. They're trying to control you.
Kate, do you have an experience like that?
No, anywhere near as beautiful as that. That's such an incredible response. Mine was interesting, and it sort of goes back to this political idea. So my YA novel, This One Is Ours, takes place in Paris. It's about art and politics, and there's also a romance in it. And I attended a book club at the same bookshop 2 years apart. And the first one, those kids were political. They wanted to talk about rioting, and they wanted to talk about, I don't know, just the radical stuff. And so I went back the following year expecting to have the same conversation, but they were year sevens and they just wanted to talk about the romance. And there was one boy who was furious at how the ending worked out between the two characters. And it was just so beautiful to see them engage so well, so differently. And so that's what, the kids will take out, or anyone, a reader will take out of a book whatever they will.
Yeah,
That's what I learned from that.
It must be interesting when you disappoint your reader with the plot line. And
it was such a great conversation. He was so angry.
Yeah.
And we
changed it.
But he got to ask me about it and say,
Yeah.
why? And tell me more. And we talked about the character's backstory that wasn't on the page. And it was so alive to him.
What's the strangest place you've ever had a story idea come to you? I mean, where do you have story ideas come to you? In your bedroom? In your lovely Wombat room?
I actually think it's the myth of inspiration, that suddenly the idea of a book spears through the universe and burrows into your brain. Instead, it's one idea on another idea. And look, there are ping moments and it comes together and you realize this can be a book. But there's never any time I think I can pinpoint where the story begins, except Hitler's Daughter. Hitler's Daughter I was 14 years old in the kitchen, couldn't do my German homework. My mother asked a friend who could speak German, and I think he'd been drinking. It was late at night in that silent kitchen. He told me just a story of a 14-year-old boy who had become a Nazi, because you had to become a Nazi, and had become a guard in a concentration camp, because that's what 14-year-old boys were doing in Hitler's Germany. And as he said, when the world around you is insane, how do you know what is good and what is evil? And I've always changed that story very slightly, because he was a very, very good man who I think had spent all of his life trying to make reparation for what he'd been forced into doing at 14, because I don't think it was just a story. I really don't think it was a story. He was crying at the end of it. And that's the only time where I can actually say that began there.
And Kate, do you have a moment, a place?
There are many moments, and I agree, Jackie, the book comes over time, and there's never a lightning bolt, but I always have new ideas whenever I'm observing or experiencing art. I go to a musical, I go to a show, I go to a gallery, and it will 100% bring new ideas and inspiration.
That's interesting. I find that with music, not art, but music. In fact, even once I'm going to a music festival, I left halfway through because I got too many ideas. I can't cope with it anymore. My brain is, but yes, definitely music.
Do you ever write with a specific child in mind?
Me.
Young Kate. How old is young Kate?
Oh, she's 15 and
15.
she hates everything.
Well, Jackie, you must write, because you write across a very broad range of children and adults. So you do you write for a specific? I mean, you didn't write this for 45-year-old Georgina Downer, clearly, but
I think, in fact, my answer would mostly be the same. Some of the books, deliberately, I've put in male protagonists, etc., because I thought of boys who actually would like a book with male protagonists. But at heart, look, my childhood was probably 60% terror, 30% boredom, and 10% books. And that 10% saved me. And so I think I am still really writing for the child who, for one reason or another, needs books, whether it's from boredom, whether it's from trauma, whether it's from danger, whether they're being bombed and you're sending cartloads off to Ukraine. For whatever reason, I think I'm writing for the child who needs this book.
A question from Caroline Selanes. Georgina mentioned Dahl, but Enid Blyton picture books were amongst those appealing to literacy and imagination of children prior to the uptake of TV and social media and AI. Can we still appeal to children in that same way? I guess sort of, I mean, yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Surely yes.
They're there.
Can't say no.
In the bookshop, when I would work in the bookshop and the children would just come in and they're just as engaged. Absolutely. They have other things that they're doing as well, but we always did.
Yeah. This is there's been a lot of questions about children's literacy, which of course we've talked about. More of a comment than a question, but totally agree. It's very sad that literacy levels are declining and should be taken more seriously. But then there's another question here: why are literacy standards falling in Australia while Book Week is exploding? I mean, is it too much parade and not enough reading? I don't know.
I think you can have. Never have reading as a brain. And to some extent, they're slightly different. We do need the books kids love, but look, different kids love different books. I think also it's not just that it's declining. It's the fact that we're actually recognizing how much of a problem literacy was. We did a local survey of people over 40 here about 20 years ago. We found out more than 50% of adults over 40 in this rural area weren't able to read the medication labels and directions on their bottles, and they couldn't read on the front page of a paper. So I think, I mean, in my childhood, if a kid couldn't read, they were just sent to pick up papers in the playground until they're old enough to leave school. So I think we're also finally recognizing how many kids are just getting through till they can leave school, but they're not able to either read or understand what they're reading. So I think it's two things. The standards are going down. The teacher librarian is almost becoming an endangered species. We're not getting more teacher librarians in schools, we're getting fewer. We're getting fewer librarians, we're getting smaller libraries. At a very time when money should be increasing and resources, it's decreasing, and it's crazy. As I said, look at what we spend on sport, and as I said, please keep spending that on sport, but spend as much on literacy and have a teacher librarian, because they are the person in the school who will know what book is going to be the magic book for that kid. And even if that kid can't understand one word in 6, it won't matter. If that is the book they love, they will push themselves through it, and they will read it. So please.
Well, as Kate and I were saying before, if you didn't understand something in a book when you're a kid, you just skipped over that bit. I mean, I remember just thinking, I don't know what that word means, but I can't be bothered looking it up. So I'll get the gist and move on. Look, we are at the end of our, oh, sorry, Jackie. We have reached 2 o'clock.
I was going to say, I loved Brave New World as a kid. It was only when I read it as an adult that I noticed it had sex in it.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have known what it was when you were young. So we are at 2 o'clock. A huge thank you to Jackie French and to Kate O'Donnell. I know Book Week is a mega busy time for authors, and I really appreciate the hour you've given us to join our live audience and also the audience who will pick up this on YouTube when we put it up later today. It's been a wonderful discussion, and long may Book Week and children's literature in Australia continue to thrive and flourish. So thank you.